Honorable members, prayers. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to look with favor upon this Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in thy sight. Give divine guidance to the President of the Republic. Endow members of Parliament and ministers of state with discernment and vision, integrity and courage, that through the labors of government, this land and people may be well and truly served, and thy good purposes for the common human life be realized in our midst. Amen. O God, grant us a vision of our country, fair as it might be, a country of righteousness, where none shall wrong his neighbor, a country of plenty, where evil and poverty shall be done away with, a country of brotherhood, where all success shall be founded on service, and honor shall be given to the deserving, a country of peace, where government shall rest on the will of the people and the love for the common good. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality. Inspire and strengthen our people, that they may give time, thought, and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of Ghana and Africa. Amen. Honorable members, there is no message from His Excellency the President to the House, and I don't have a formal communication today. Just to plead with you that anytime any of the caucuses want to have a meeting, please let the House have notice. Don't keep the House waiting with a last-minute information to Speaker that a caucus is having a meeting. Let the other side know so that they don't have to come and be waiting for Speaker to come for the House to resume sitting. Please, these courtesies should be extended to each other. Now, we'll move on to item 4, which is correction of votes and proceedings and official report. We will start with the correction of votes and proceedings of Tuesday, 31st May, 2022. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, on page 8, number 39 and 51, both members were present yesterday, but they've been marked absent. 39 and 51.
Yes, table of office Please kindly take note. 39 and 51, we are told were present. Yes.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. On page 8, number 47, I marked absent, but Mr. Speaker, I was in the House yesterday. Thank you.
Also note number 47 on page 8. Present. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, page 3 is missing. There is no page 3.
You mean you don't have page 3?
I don't have page 3, so my name is also missing.
Yes, but there's page 3. I have page 3. And your name is what?
Kujo Robert Wisdom.
Sorry?
Kujo Robert.
Number 25.
Yes, it's there. Page 3 is there. Kujo Robert Wisdom, the member of parliament for Ministerial Valley. So you are captured. You need to get what you have there replaced with the proper one. Page 9. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on page 9, the leader of the Zambian delegation, it's the leader of the opposition, not the opposition whip, if I remember very well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item 5, it's been captured as led by the leader of the opposition whip, by the leader of the opposition.
Yes, table office, there was a leader of the opposition who led the team, not the opposition whip. And then now you see 5 Roman 1, that's the opposition whip. But the leader of the opposition is Honorable Brian Mundubili. So you are right. Table office, kindly take note. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17. Page 18. Page 18. Yes, Honorable Ablakwa.
Right now, Speaker, my page 17 is blank, and I want to find out if.
Sorry, page 8. 17 is what?
Blank.
You're having the wrong one, so please ask for replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Page 19. Honorable members, in the absence of any further corrections, the votes and proceedings of the 5th sitting held on Tuesday, 31st May 2022, are adopted as a true record of proceedings. Honorable members, we now move on to the official report and have a copy of the official report of Tuesday, 24th May 2022.
Don't you worry, you are always President.
I hope members have copies of this official report. Any corrections? There being no corrections, the official report of Tuesday, 24th May 2022 is hereby adopted as a true record of proceedings. We move to item 5. Item 5, questions. We have questions standing in the names of about 4 honorable members. There are 6 questions in total, and we are expecting the first ones to be answered by the Minister for Works and Housing. The first is question number 355, standing in the name of Mr. Kwame Jujole Gakwe, the MP for Keita. Honorable Member, you may ask your question now.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask the Minister for Works and Housing the measures the ministry is taking to strengthen the Rent Control Department to perform its lawful duties.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works and Housing has initiated the following measures to strengthen the Rent Control Department to perform its lawful duties. 1. Review of the Rent Act 1963, Act 220, and the Rent Control Law 1986, PNDC Law 138. The review of the Rent Act is necessary in the light of the shortcomings of the existing Rent Act 1963, Act 220, and the Rent Control Law 1986, PNDC Law 138, which do not significantly address current challenges in the rental housing industry. The ministry submitted a memorandum and received policy approval from Cabinet in February 2022 for the review of the existing Rent Act. The ministry is working with the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Justice on a draft rent bill. It will eventually be brought before this August House for consideration and approval after an extensive stakeholder engagement. Mr. Speaker, the bill, if approved, will provide the framework for comprehensive restructuring of the Rent Control Department to make it more effective and efficient. Additionally, offices will be created in all regions and districts in the country. Number 2, the digitization of the department. To enhance service delivery standards of the Rent Control Department, the Ministry of Works and Housing is collaborating with the Ministry of Communication and Digitalization to digitize the operations of the department. As a result, a technical team comprising of National Information Technology Agency, NITA, and the Ghana-India Kofi Annan Center of Excellence in ICT has presented the technical report, which has recommended, among other things, the design and architecture of systems to achieve full digitalization of the Rent Control Department. This exercise, Mr. Speaker, will commence at the national and later to be linked to the region and the district offices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, any supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right, Honorable Speaker, I would like to ask the Minister, before the review Does government have any intention of decentralizing the operations of the Rent Control Department?
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a process of decentralization going on already. In fact, as we speak, we have some district offices, we have 14 regional offices. We haven't achieved full decentralization, but we believe strongly that the review of the Act will enable us to expedite the process of the decentralization. Thank you.
Yes, any further supplementary?
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. I would like to find out from the Minister. Now the challenges are becoming unbearable for especially the poor. Is there any way by which the action can be expedited to the processes of lessening the burden of the plight with regards to this?
You talk about reduction of the rent to lessen the hardship of the poor in society. That is the question. You mean you haven't even heard what I said? How to lessen the hardship of rent on the poor? That is the question. Is there any measures you are taking to lessen the hardship on the poor as a result of the situation we are in?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are plans in the review process that will help lessen the rent that Ghanaians are paying. But government is also in the process of introducing a national rental scheme, rental assistance scheme, that will help provide rent advance for would-be renters who are on payroll to be able to pay rent advance, so that they don't have to suffer this phenomenon of having to pay long rent advance beyond the 6 months that is stipulated in the Rent Act. Thank you.
Yes, let him finish his supplementary. Are you done?
Yes, Honourable Speaker, I'm done.
I'm done. The chair for health. I think you are senior.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm senior. Oh, yeah, the same.
Oh,
we came the same year, Mr. Speaker.
You came together.
The same year.
So, in terms of age, who is senior?
Okay, he doesn't know my age.
The senior man should take the first bite.
All right.
The House takes seniority into serious consideration. It's not the final determinant, but at least.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. And we thank the Minister for answering the question. Mr. Speaker, in line with what our colleague has asked, in November 2020, prior to the election, his government promised to pay rent for the youth in their second term. How far are plans of government paying rent for the youth as you promised during the 2020 election?
It's not part of the question. If the manifesto of NPP part of the question, Adam.
The supplementary doesn't follow the question. The focus of the question is what measures government is taking to strengthen the rent control department to perform its lawful duties. Now you are moving into other areas. But the minister is available. If you have the answer, please, you are liberty to give them, but it's not actually a supplementary question. You don't have the answer. Yes, minority leader. Minority leader. He said he hasn't got the answer.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for indulging me with a supplementary question to the minister's answer on rent. Mr. Speaker, the minister in his answer is talking about digitalizing rent control. And Mr. Speaker, as I heard the minister, the law provides that rent payable shall not exceed 6 months. But in practice, we know that landlords demand rent in advance of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. What steps is the minister taking to enforce the Rent Act? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very much aware of the issues raised by the Honorable Minority Leader, and it's come about because of some market failures in the renter segment of the housing sector. And it's because we have a very huge housing deficit. The demand outstrips supply. Supply outstrips demand. And as a result, there's a market failure. So it has become necessary, in the light of what is happening, to review the Rent Act. And that's one of the main reasons why we are taking the necessary steps to review the Rent Act. At this stage, we are working with the Attorney General and also receiving proposals from all stakeholders. So if the Honorable Minority Leader has any suggestions at this stage, it will be very much welcome, so that we can have a very up-to-date rent law that can stand the test of time. Thank you.
Well, as leader, I'll allow you. If not, supplementary question is one at a time.
Mr. Speaker,
one man, one supplementary. If you were a woman, maybe I'll give two, but he is leader, so I'll give him.
Mr.
Yes.
Speaker, thanks for tolerating me. So, Mr. Minister, is it demand and supply which is regulating rent payable, or the Rent Act?
Thank you very much. It's not the demand and supply. In fact, the Rent Act is very clear on that. But Mr. Speaker, because of the deficit in the housing sector, it puts the landlords in an advantageous position, and therefore they are able to dictate what should be the duration of the rent advance. For instance, because it puts them in an advantage, it makes them conduct themselves in an opportunistic manner. I think I mentioned this during my vetting. And therefore, if I give you 6 months and you tell me that you cannot afford, there are a host of others who will come and see me behind the scene and take the rent, say in 3 years. So that is what I'm talking about, the market failure. And as a result, we all need to come together and help with the review of the Rent Act. That can stand the test of time. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Ahi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the minister's answer, he says that the rent control law do not significantly address current challenges in the rental housing industry. Can the minister tell us some of the challenges and how the review is seeking to address them? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, please, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned these challenges, and it's because of the demand and supply imbalances, and the fact that the Rent Act, which was passed some 60 years ago, has basically outlived its usefulness. So this is the time for us to look at the current challenges we are facing in the housing sector, rental housing sector, so that we can make the necessary suggestions in the new Rent Act. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Suhini.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to find out from the Minister, maybe for purposes of clarification, if by his answer he suggested that because of the housing deficit, the state is helpless when it comes to enforcing the Rent Act.
Have you heard him?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, because of the deficit is creating imbalance, demand and supply imbalance, and this is it is inhibiting government's effort at implementing the current Rent Act. I think I've made this point even from the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, I think this is sufficient. We'll move on to the next. Honorable, yes, Chiwete.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, considering the cost of building materials and the challenge the rent control has in resolving differences between landlords and tenants, will the minister consider, or will the government consider, in advancing loans to young people to pay for their rents? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my first response to the supplementary question, I did indicate that government is about to start the implementation of a national rent assistance scheme, and that is a scheme that will provide some sort of rent advance to would-be renters who are on payroll, so that they can pay the rent back over a period of time by monthly basis. So there's already a program that will be implemented very soon. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, in my welcome address to members, the Rent Act or the rent bill that we are processing is one of the bills I referred to, that it has delayed in being presented to the House. And I called on you, leading that sector, to expedite action on it. Lawmaking is not that of the executive, it's of Parliament. Policy formulation and formation starts with the executive. But when it's to be translated to law, it ends up with Parliament. And so all the stakeholders you are inviting will also be invited to the House again. And so there is no need for that kind of delay in processing bills at the level of the executive, because the relevant committee of Parliament will have to go through the same process. And so please, I want to urge you, because I said this meeting, we are ready to receive the bill and to process it, because housing is an essential of life. Roof over the head of a person is very essential. And it's governments that are to lead in the provision of these roofs. because they are not just for individuals. A house is a societal item, and so the society should assist. And the organ leading the society is government. I was in that sector before, but we've been playing too much politics with that sector. When we were bringing STS, there was too much politics and there were allegations about corruption. Any Ghanaian who has any evidence about any corruption dealing with STS, please bring it out and let it be investigated. I was the sector minister. I don't want to be reading that in the media, baseless allegations about what happened on STS. I was there. Please, let's stop playing politics with essentials of life. With this, we move on to the next question. 379. And this question stands in the name of the same honorable member, Honorable Kwame Jujole Gape, the member of parliament for Keita. Yes, honorable member.
Thank you, right honorable speaker.
It's Gape.
Gape,
sorry.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I rise to ask the Minister for Works and Housing what efforts the ministry is making to enforce the law on leasing assets in accordance with the Rent Control Act.
Yes, honorable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under the Rent Act 1963, Act 220, and the Rent Law, Control Law 1986, PND's Law 138, the Rent Control Department under the Ministry of Works and Housing is mandated to 1. Perform assessment of recoverable rent on an application by a landlord, tenant, or a person interested in the premises. Investigate and make determination of complaints by landlords, tenants, and other persons interested in the premises. 3. Investigate and make determinations of any matters relating to the laws of Ghana referred by the minister or the rent magistrate. 4. Prepare rent registers. 5. Maintain register of vacant premises. 6. Examine any landlord, tenant, or other person for purposes of ascertaining whether the provisions of the rent laws of Ghana are being observed. 7. Take measures against tenants who have absconded from their premises and force open doors under the authority of an order made by the rent magistrate. And 8. Make complaints to the rent magistrate that an offense under the laws of Ghana has been committed for the purpose of investigation and determination. The Rent Control Department has also intensified its sensitization program to educate the populace on their rights and responsibilities under the rent laws of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works and Housing is working through the Rent Control Department to enforce the laws on leasing assets in accordance with the Rent Act and the Rent Control Act, PND's Law 138. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, any supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, right honorable speaker. In the answer provided by the minister, looking at bullet first point 2 and point 3, investigations and make documentations of complaints as one of the mandates of the Rent Control Department. I would like to find out from the minister the investigations they have been conducting, the documentations they are making. I would like to know how many complaints have come to the Rent Control. Is there any record you can give us regards to that?
How many complaints have come to the Rent Control all over the country?
Yes, honorable speaker.
Yes, you have that data.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that they receive a lot of complaints. I have the data, but I don't have them handy now. But I can come back to give the accurate information on that to the honourable member. Thank you.
Honourable member, that's quite a large number. The whole country, there are a lot of complaints of tenants in particular. There are some landlords. There are a lot. And therefore, maybe by this time they are being compiling 2021. You didn't mention the specific year anyway. So he will need some time to be able to present that information to you. Yes, any further supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked that question to ascertain whether the processes are working. So it's good the minister is going to get back to us. So, Honourable Speaker, thank you for that. In point 8, the minister provided in the answer that the Rent Control Department has intensified sensitization programs to educate the populace on their rights and responsibility under the Rent Control Act. I would like to find out from the minister, which mediums are they using to educate the populace in regards to rent control?
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The department has a regular schedule with radio stations and TV stations. So the major medium that they use is radio and TV. Thank you.
Honourable members.
Thank you,
yes.
Right Honourable Speaker. My last question, I would like to find out from the minister, the government departments and institutions who sometimes rent from private sector pay 2 years, 3 years advance. I would like to find out from the minister, is it not contravention? They are not contravening the Rent Control Act. And if he gets to know, what measures or actions or punitive measures is he taking?
Well, Minister, I think it's a bit different from the earlier question. So, please, if you have the answer, just put it.
Mr. Speaker, this supplementary question is exactly as in question 380, and it is also the same thing as the Minority Leader asked. So I don't know exactly, and if you look at question 380, it's the same thing he's asking.
No, the focus of the Minority Leader was different from this one. And then I think that the minister is entitled to respond to the question. And so let's allow him to do so.
Mr. Speaker, the question, I'm not too sure whether it's a supplementary question, because that same question is a substantive question under 380, which also stands in his name. So
it's for me to determine that, whether I will allow him to ask that question or not. Because he has brought it as supplementary under 379. So if you are able to respond to it, that will be the end of it. We will not go to it again.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I would like you to ask the question again, please.
Well, Honourable Member, his request is to allow him to address it when he's answering the substantive question in 380.
Yes, Honourable Speaker.
All right. Any other supplementary question? Yes, Honourable Suhini.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want the minister to clarify for me. In answer to the earlier question, Mr. Speaker, the minister stated that because of the housing deficit, the state is helpless in enforcing the Rent Act. But Mr. Speaker, in answer to the second question, he tells us in conclusion to the answer that the Ministry of Works and Housing is working through the Rent Control Department to enforce the laws. But Mr. Speaker, earlier he said the state is helpless at enforcing the laws because of the housing deficit. So I'm a bit confused how he'll be helpful if he reconciles the two positions, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I did not say that the government or the state is helpless. I pointed out the challenges in enforcing the existing laws. But as much as possible, we are making efforts to enforce it. That one, we have to do our best. But we are challenged. And to address these challenges, that is why we have taken steps to review the rent law, for which even the Right Honourable Speaker has indicated that it's even long overdue. Thank you.
Honourable Sweeney.
Mr. Speaker, thanks for indulging me. This is a house of records, Mr. Speaker. And the minister was categorical. My question was straightforward. And he was categorical in his answer when he said that, yes, the state is helpless when it comes to enforcing the Rent Act because of the housing deficit. He was very categorical. So I think that it is not fair for the minister to suggest that my confusion is baseless, because it was categorical. He said, yes, the state is helpless when it comes to enforcing the Rent Act. And I'm just asking him to reconcile that earlier position with this answer.
You are insisting that he used the word helpless.
Speaker, my question was, is the state helpless when it comes to enforcing the Rent Act because of the housing deficit? And his answer was an emphatic yes, Mr. Speaker.
I didn't hear him say that. I heard him say that the state is facing challenges. I didn't hear you say that the state is helpless. Help from who? If the state cannot lead, who else will be helping the state? Yes, anyway, the minister is here. I cannot be seen to be speaking for him. So, what did you actually say?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I never used the word helpless. I did indicate that there are challenges in the enforcement of the existing Rent Act, which is acknowledged, widely acknowledged in this country. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it is on this basis that you have admonished us to expedite the process of bringing it to the House. So I didn't use the word helpless, and I think that is the theme of your question. So since I didn't use it, I don't think it's necessary with respect.
Honourable members, we move on to question number 986. Sorry, 380. 380. Still stands in the name of Honourable Kwame Jujole Gakwe.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker, for giving me the opportunity once again. I rise to ask the Minister for Works and Housing the steps the ministry is taking to address the issues of house owners taking more than 6 months rent advance from tenants before renting out their properties in contravention of the Rent Control Act 1963 at 220. Thank you.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Section 25 of the Rent Act 1963 Act 220 prohibits landlords from taking more than 6 months rent advance, and therefore any landlord who contravenes the law commits an offence and is punishable by law. The Ministry of Works and Housing, through the Rent Control Department, has been addressing petitions brought to its office for settlement. The Rent Control Department has been undertaking sensitization programs to educate landlords and tenants on the provisions of the law, especially with regards to the rights and responsibilities of the landlords. Mr. Speaker, rapid urbanization and reliance on market mechanisms, as well as the inability of our housing delivery system over the years to meet our population growth, has resulted in a huge housing deficit. As a result, demand for housing has outstripped supply, which ultimately favors the landlord. To a large extent, this situation affects a significant section of the population, especially those in lower to middle income range. In the medium to long term, the ministry is pursuing policy measures to create the enabling environment, together with the private sector, for the provision of additional housing stock in the rental market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member, any supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Honourable Speaker. In the Minister's answer, my question is it's not necessarily about demand and supply of housing deficit. My question is related to how the enforcement of the law, whether demand and supply, the law is there. So how are we enforcing that law, the law, where we are preventing landlords not to charge more than 6 months? That is what my question is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I've mentioned it more than once here, that the enforcement is challenged because of the imbalances, demand-supply imbalances in the sector. And one of the steps that we are taking to make sure that we strike a right balance for tenants and landlords to not to suffer in the rent agreement is to review the law, because we also have to put in incentives in the law to make sure that landlords are able to recover the cost of their investments so that they can produce more to increase the housing stock. So ultimately, there is a challenge in the enforcement of the law. You are saying 6 months. Yeah, of course, you can say 6 months. But I will say that, no, I won't take 6 months. I'm sure my daughter or my son is coming from abroad, so I won't rent it anymore. But another tenant who is in badly need of a house, will go around and meet the landlord and offer, say, even 3 years advance, and he will take it. And that is why I'm saying that enforcement under the current challenges is difficult. And that is why we want to review it, so that you can address the concerns of landlords as well as the concerns of tenants. Thank you.
Yes, Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm compelled to come by a supplementary again to the Honourable Minister for Works and Housing. Because, Mr. Speaker, in his answer, these are his words. He stated that significant sections of the population are affected, which means significant sections of Ghanaians are made to pay 20,000, 30,000, 1, 2 year, 3 year in advance against the law. And you also, in your answer, stated that it's an offense punishable under the law. Reconcile that. Yet, that is what pertains in the country. Landlords are asking for 2, 3 years rent advance, huge sums of money, 20, 30, 50,000 from poor tenants against the letter of the law that you are supervising. So what do you intend to do about it? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as far as I'm concerned, I believe I have addressed this issue. And it's the bottom line is the challenges in the enforcement of the law. It's the challenges. You want me to strictly, do you want the system to strictly enforce this? Landlords will pull back. Let's be realistic and let's not, rent matters are not issues that we should politicize. It's very important that we all come together and help with the review of the renter. Thank you.
Honorable members, yes.
Mr. Speaker, is the Honorable Minister telling this House and Ghanaians as a whole that the law should not be strictly enforced?
Honorable Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I cannot stand before this House and say that a law that has been passed a law that is governing the country should not be enforced. But I've indicated that in its enforcement there are challenges, and we are working together to review it. That's all. Thank you.
Honorable members, the minister is saying that a strict enforcement of the law will cause more problems. And that is why they are revising it and the bill before us so that we can update the law to at least capture today's realities. We are talking about a law that was passed in 1963 and we are in 2022. Definitely, I think it has outlived its usefulness. And we need to breathe fresh air on it. That is what we are doing. But now, to strictly enforce that law, you create chaotic situations in the country. Yes, the honorable member for Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the answers of the minister, the last paragraph, the minister says that the ministry is pursuing policy measures to create the enabling environment for private sector participation. In order for this not to be business as usual, can the minister tell the House one of those policy measures that government has introduced to create the said enabling environment?
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Government has just introduced a new, or I should call it a revised affordable housing program. That is a private sector driven, but government recognizes that government has to play a part in the provision of affordable housing for Ghanaians. I've mentioned this time and again that there are statistics that say that 60% of Ghanaians need some sort of support from government to be able to access housing. And it is in that respect that government is trying to absorb a major component of housing construction, which is land and infrastructure. Once government absorbs that in the new housing, affordable housing program, it can subsidize housing to the cost of about 60%. And government will provide the land, government will provide the horizontal infrastructure on the land, so that the private sector will come in and build for just the shell and sell, with an arrangement with the banks to provide more long-term mortgages so that public servants can take advantage of. So that is what we are currently working on. Yes.
Honorable members, we move on to question number 986. And this question stands in the name of the Honorable Member for Bole Bamboy, Honorable Yusuf Suleimana. Yes, Honorable.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask the Minister for Works and Housing who the occupants of the UNDP flats in cantonments are and whether or not they pay rent to government. Thank you.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the UNDP flats at cantonments were constructed in 1960 to serve as a diplomatic enclave, offering residential accommodation to the staff of foreign missions in Ghana. The facility, as at December 2020, comprised of 48 flats, housed in 4 blocks of 3-story buildings. Mr. Speaker, the initial occupants of the UNDP flats were mostly staff of foreign missions in Ghana, the Cuban Medical Brigade, and staff of individual foreign companies. Mr. Speaker, it is significant to state that since the construction of the flats, there has never been any major rehabilitation, and therefore the flats are in a deplorable state. The deterioration of the flats triggered tenants who initially petitioned the ministry to take measures to rehabilitate the deplorable state of the flats, to leave the flats for private and alternate accommodation, which was considered suitable for them. Consequently, by 2021, all foreign nationals and diplomats who were resident in the flats vacated. This thus creating opportunity for squatters to take advantage and occupy the flats. The current occupants of the UNDP flats, Mr. Speaker, are squatters and therefore do not pay rent whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, there have been previous actions by the ministry to give a facelift to the UNDP flats by undertaking technical and financial appraisals of the flats. Measures being taken to give a facelift to the UNDP flats to serve its original purpose include the following. The ministry, in consultation with the relevant institutions, is considering an eviction exercise to get all the squatters out of the buildings. The Ministry of Works and Housing has included the UNDP flats as part of its redevelopment scheme, and therefore is in the process of arranging a structured financing scheme for the rehabilitation as well as the redevelopment of the flats. Mr. Speaker, the ministry will provide periodic updates in order to keep this House abreast with progress on actions being taken to rehabilitate the flats and generate revenue for the state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, any supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, I want to take the minister to paragraph 4 of his answer. And with your permission, I want to read. The current occupants of the UNDP flats are squatters and therefore do not pay rent whatsoever. Very interesting, Mr. Speaker. This issue was captured in the the audit report 2018, and the minister submitted a response to the Public Accounts Committee. In there, he admitted that the occupants of these flats are national security staff, operatives. Today, the same minister is telling us that they are squatters. Same minister, Mr. Speaker, can you reconcile this? I'm sad for this country.
Yes. Yes, Majority Deputy Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to draw you to Order 67.
Order
67(1)(d). D. And then he said, a question shall not be asked regarding proceedings in committee which has not been placed before the House by a report of the committee. My colleague here referred to Public Accounts Committee, of which there was a question and answer,
67,
which is not related to this. And I don't see why he should ask such a question. And Mr. Speaker, the minister was not the Minister for Works and Housing in 2018, as he referred to in the committee. So how do you expect him to answer a committee report which is against Rule 67(1)(d)?
I'm just trying to get the point you are raising. You said Order 67(1)(d). A question shall not be asked regarding proceedings in a committee which have not been placed before the House by a report from the committee. So, what?
Mr. Speaker, he referred to a committee, that is the Public Accounts Committee proceedings, and referring it to the question he is asking the minister now. So my issue here is that you cannot relate proceedings at the Public Accounts Committee to bring it to the House. That's my point.
That is not what the order says. The order says a question shall not be asked regarding proceedings in a committee which have not been placed before the House by a report from the committee. Are you saying that the Public Accounts Committee have not placed the report before this House? Yes.
Mr. Speaker, this is the 2018 report that I made reference to. And that report was brought here and copiously debated. Thank you. So, for your education, this particular reference you have made doesn't come in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister, I'm told that from the intervention of your leader that you were not the minister at that time, 2018. Is that the case?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, if I'm to respond to your question, yes, I wasn't a minister in 2018.
So you inherited the assets and liabilities?
No, but I think he is referring to a statement that I may have made at the Public Accounts Committee. Okay, and I said that they are squatters. That's what you are saying. I said that they are national security operatives. Yeah. Okay, so Mr. Speaker, I will respond to that. Yes, Mr. Speaker,
please answer. Yes.
During my vetting at the Appointments Committee, there were a lot of people, not a lot of people, some members raised this issue that national security officials are occupying UNDP flags. So we all, it's been in the papers, we all have been under the impression that national security operatives are occupying. I have since checked with the National Security Secretariat, and they have indicated to me that none of the operatives are staying at the UNDP flat. It is on this basis that I'm saying that they are squatters. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, you are talking about a different issue. He was talking about Public Accounts Committee meeting, not vetting, which is appointment committee.
Yes.
Yes. Talk about the Public Accounts Committee.
Mr. Speaker, yes. I'm saying that it came up at the Public Accounts Committee, and subsequently we read in the papers. So we all were under impression that those occupants were national security. So I actually believe, and that is why I made that assertion. But I have since checked with national security, and they have indicated that none of their officials, none of their operatives live there.
Yes, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, let me put on record that I made reference to Public Accounts Committee, and the specific report is the 2018 report. You appeared and you swore an oath and you spoke to the issues that were put before you. And one of the issues was that your ministry failed to collect rent arrears to the tune of 3.4 million Ghana cedi. And in your response, you did indicate that those people occupying the flats are national security operatives, and that you wrote the Minister of National Security to assist you recover that money. Today, you are telling this House that the occupants are squatters, and that is why I'm asking you to reconcile the two. Thank you, Minister.
Honorable Member, we have gone beyond the issue or remit of questions and answers. From his response, he says that after that, he got in touch with the ministry, the National Security Ministry, and the ministry informed him that they don't have any of their staff members living in those flats. And therefore, the issue you are raising can be taken on a different process, not questions and answers again.
Mr. Speaker, having listened to you, it means that the minister lied to this House. That is what I want to put before him before I proceed. That he lied under oath. Because if you didn't have enough information, you were at liberty to say that I don't have this information. But you swore an oath and then you lied to this House. And today you have come here and you are lying to us. That's my position.
Honorable Member, that one is not admitted. When you read 67(1)(b), it says a question shall not contain any arguments, expression of opinion, inferences, imputations, epithets, or controversial, ironical, or offensive expressions or hypothetical cases. Now, he has come out to inform you that yes, what I said initially, after that I cross-checked and it was found not to be the case. So I said there are other processes you have to use. And if you are not conversant with them, I think your leaders will lead you. Yes.
Speaker, respectfully, I just want to seek your guidance on...
No, what are you doing now?
Let me finish my question.
We hasn't finished his supplementary questions.
Yes, yeah, we haven't got it. That's why I'm seeking your guidance, Mr. Speaker, on the back and forth between the minister and the honourable member for Bali. I'm seeking your guidance, Mr. Speaker, respectfully.
You want to learn?
I just want to drink from the fountain of your wisdom.
Yes,
Mr.
go
Speaker.
on.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I am looking at order 30E and F. And E says any act or conduct calculated or intended to deceive Parliament or any of its committees. And F says deliberate misleading of Parliament or any of its committees may fall under contempt and others. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm just wondering if this, can be considered to be an act intended to mislead Parliament, given that this information or answers were given to a committee of Parliament, and then this answer is also given to the plenary. I'm just seeking your guidance if that is what you are suggesting to the Member of Parliament from Bali to consider. Thank you.
I'm sure you didn't hear what I said. It's not for the Speaker to do that. It's for you, the members. Please, any further supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to make reference to paragraph 2 of his answer, where he said that because of the deplorable state of the facility, the occupants, the legitimate occupants, vacated. Contrary to this, when he appeared before the Public Accounts Committee, he said that the ministry had received reports of forceful eviction of the legitimate occupants. How does he reconcile the two? Thank you.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Member, do you say I said that the ministry has received reports of forceful? By who? By who? Mr. Speaker, the records are there, and this is also a report from your ministry, the one that you were holding on that day when you were speaking to us. And I can quote from it very quickly. With your permission, let me.
Honourable Member, you directed a question to him. So it's him, not any other person. So answer the question, Minister. The question is directed to you. So if you are not the one, say so. If you are the one, respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll find it out from the Honourable Member.
Honourable Minister, it's not your time to ask him questions. It's your time to answer questions. You want him to educate you?
Yes, sir.
If you haven't heard the question properly, you can ask for him to repeat the question. But you don't ask him questions.
Honourable Member, please repeat your question.
He says he hasn't heard you. Kindly repeat the question.
Mr. Speaker, my question is that when you appear before the Public Accounts Committee, you admitted, and it's on record, that the occupants of that facility, legitimate occupants, were harassed and chased out of the facility. That's what you said. And again, it's on this report, this response you gave us. Today, you are saying that it was because of the deplorable state of the facility, that is why they vacated. The two are different positions, and I want you, as the minister responsible for works and housing, to reconcile this.
Who gave this?
Thank you.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't quite remember what I'm alleged to have said at the said meeting. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, that is the more reason why I said there's a need for me to quote from this your document. And this document is in this house. It's part of our records. This is a response to audit observations from your ministry. And you have a column that talks about rent arrears of UNDP flats to the tune of 3,426,423 Ghana cedi. Now, I'll make a document available. Now, in that document, if you come to column 3, and I want to read, you admitted that these are. Okay, so let me just start. In 2017, the intervention of the Inspector General of Police was first sought for the eviction of illegal occupants when the ministry began to receive reported cases, emphasis, reported cases of forceful occupants, or forcible occupation of the flats and harassment of legitimate occupants. This is what the document said. And I'm saying that you were there and you spoke to this issue. Today, you are saying that the occupants there left because of the deplorable state of the facility. Two different stands. Honourable Minister, how do we reconcile this? Since this house is the house of records, which you are part of. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, as far as I know, as a minister, and I've been in the office for barely a year, the official records available to me indicate that the foreign nationals, diplomats who were living there, left there because the building was in a very deplorable state. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, my final question is, I want to find out from the minister whether he is aware that there is an arrears of 3,426,423 Ghana cedi outstanding in respect of this very issue that we're talking about. Whether you are aware, and if you are aware, what are you doing to retrieve the money? Because government needs money.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, I am aware of some arrears, and we are taking the necessary steps to retrieve the money. Thank you.
Honorable Member, you have asked your 3 supplementary already. Honorable Kwame Abuja.
Right, Honorable Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity. May I ask the Honorable Gentleman, the Minister, if any of the rent owed government is by diplomatic missions, because you have already said that diplomats were there, it means they were legitimate tenants. They have since vacated the place since 2021. Does any of the diplomatic missions owe you rent based on the time that they occupied the place? And who are those diplomatic missions that owe the ministry rent?
Yes, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that I'm aware, I've been told that there are some arrears, but I'm unable to say specifically who are those owing governments. But I can come back to the House on that. Thank you.
Honorable, behind you in smoke, the one wearing the mask. Honorable Member, is that your beard?
Mr. Speaker, it's because I can't afford a blade to shave my beard.
That's right.
Is that Honorable Mills?
I'm sorry, sir.
Honorable Mills?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I understand your age. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm the Vice Chairman of Public Accounts Committee.
Yes, please.
So I remember this minister.
Yeah, please.
If I could ask this minister, you come here, you admit that there are squatters living in government bungalows. They've been there since 2017. What have you done to evict these people? Why are you encouraging hooliganism, allowing these people to live in these government houses without collecting rent?
Thank you.
Next place they'll be occupying will be the Flagstaff House.
Well, this is time for questions. The question that you asked is the first one. The action is taken to evict them, and that they've been there since 2017. Yes. Minister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, he said he's talking about 2017. I have been in office since 2021, barely a year. But I did mention in my response that the ministry has absorbed the UNDP flats into a redevelopment scheme. And we are currently arranging financing to redevelop and rehabilitate the place so that it can serve its original purpose. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, when they refer to you, they are not referring to you as the individual. They are referring to you as the ministry. The ministry they are talking about, not you. When they are talking about actions being taken, your words your work committee level is what is now being taken against you in person. Then you can say maybe this was what you got from the ministry. Then they can take you on why you didn't cross-check before you came, swore an oath, and that's why I say a different process is to handle that, not questions and answers. Yes, Honorable Suhini.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to find out from the minister when the squatters will be evicted from that building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm not in a position as I stand here to talk about the exact time, but I can assure you that we will be working on it. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, are there still squatters there?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there are squatters there.
As of today?
Yes, sir.
So you know there are squatters, and they are still there. Well, this is not an invitation for more questions. I will recognize the Honorable Lady. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Minister, in 2016, a contract was awarded on those same flats, same UNDP flats, to renovate, redevelop them. And I'm also trying to reconcile the answers given that there are squatters in there, but a contract was awarded, mobilization was given to the contractor, and yet now there are squatters, national security personnel. I'm even confused about what exactly is going on the UNDP flats. Do you have the right briefing? And if so, have you sought the right information also from your predecessor who is sitting there also?
No, Honorable Minister, one question at a time, Honorable Member.
Thank you.
The question is, are you aware that a contract was awarded for the reconstruction, am I right, redevelopment of that UNDP flats? Are you aware? And the date they gave was 2016, right? Yes. Are you aware of that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, I'm aware, and that's why I did indicate that some attempts have been made by government to rehabilitate and redevelop the place. But there is paucity of information surrounding that transaction, and I'm currently working on getting more information so that possibly I can come to the house to brief the house. Thank you.
Yes. Honorable Richard Achampo.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, government has an obligation to protect life and property in the country. Now that the minister has confirmed that those people occupying the facilities are squatters, would the minister consider allowing those people to stay there because they don't have any place of abode, so that they can also have a better place of living? Would you consider that?
I think this question is moot, so we leave it there. Yes, Minister, I have not admitted the question. Any supplementary? Yes.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. The Minister, in providing his answer, indicated that indeed
they have arrears of rent to receive. Meanwhile, in his response, he indicated here on the paper that they are squatters and therefore they do not pay rent. How does he reconcile the two statements?
No. The rent that they refer to are rent owed by earlier legal occupants, which came to the Public Accounts Committee, which was 4.something million. That was the reference I heard the Honourable Member for Bole Bamboy talk about. The current squatters are squatters. They don't pay rent.
Mr. Speaker, he indicated that they are considering measures. So if there were people who had already left and they were supposed to be diplomats, how is he going to retrieve that money?
They were not supposed to be. They were diplomats. They were not supposed. Those who were the legal occupants were diplomats. But it is not the case that diplomats don't pay rent. They pay. Diplomats pay rent. Wherever we have our distance outside, we pay. It depends on the bilateral agreement between the countries. Why? You want to have another bite?
I want to put the record straight, since I'm the one who originated the question.
Yes.
The audit report covers 2017, but it's a report that was brought to this House in 2018. And from the Minister's response, in 2017, the legitimate occupants had left. So the illegitimate occupants came in. And so they stayed there for 1 year. And that is what we're talking about, the arrears. So it is those who have occupied there illegally who have not paid their rent. And if he has admitted...
No. If you are occupying a place illegally, there is no contract between the person there and the landlord. When you get premises as a tenant, you enter a lawful contract with the landlord and you agree on the value of rent to pay. That I'm not answering for him, but I'm just drawing your attention to the fact that what I referred to was right, because your question is emanating from my reaction. So it's not the minister.
So, Speaker, may I rephrase my question then?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The squatters that the minister referred to in his answer, is he aware that these people are fanatics of the ruling government called Delta Forces?
Where is that allegation coming from?
Mr. Speaker, he referred to them as squatters. And I'm asking whether he is aware whether these people are Delta Forces group living in those flats. Whether he's aware or not.
That they are Delta Forces. I don't know about any lawful organization called Delta Forces.
Mr. Speaker, that is why I want the minister to tell us whether he's aware or not.
Honourable Minister, are you aware that the squatters are members of a group called Delta Forces?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware.
Honourable members, we have some other business to do. There are left a few more questions. Let's move on. Please, we now move on to question number 1084, who stands in the name of the Honourable Member for K2 South, Mrs. Ablan Jafar Gomachi. Yes, Honourable Member, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I go to the question, may I seek your indulgence to correct the fact that my father is Mr. Patrick Gomachi I was married to Brigadier General Martin Ahiagro, whose name I didn't carry. And so table office should kindly take note and not refer to me as Mrs. Gomashi, because that's an anomaly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Table office kindly take note.
May I continue then to ask my question? Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask Minister for Works and Housing the status of the phase 2 of the Blekusu Sea defense wall in the Katu South municipality. I thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works and Housing is taking urgent steps towards the construction of the second phase of the Blekusu Sea Defense Project to mitigate the risks of coastal erosion and flooding of the communities along the coastal stretch due to intense tidal wave action. Beaches along the Blekusu coastal stretch are narrow and are eroding at an alarming rate because of tidal wave action. Some communities along this coastal stretch often experience flooding in the event of wave overstopping. These have impacted negatively on lives, livelihoods, and property. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate beach erosion and flooding of communities along the Blekusu coastal stretch, the Ministry of Works and Housing, from July 2015 to July 2019, engaged Messrs. Amandi Holdings Limited to complete the first phase of the Blekusu Coastal Protection Project. The works entailed the construction of 23 armor rock groins to protect a coastal stretch of 4,300 meters. That's 4.3 kilometers. Mr. Speaker, the works done under the first phase has functioned effectively to protect the people while enhancing fishing activities, which is the main source of livelihood for the affected communities. Mr. Speaker, in my previous response to this same question to this August House, I indicated that the Ministry of Works and Housing noted the urgent need to undertake the second phase of the Blekusu Coastal Protection Project and therefore commissioned technical feasibility study focused on Blekusu community to enable Messrs. Amandi continue with the second phase of the project. However, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Public Financial Management, Public Investment Management Regulation, LI 2411, a more comprehensive feasibility study is now required. In that direction, the Minister for Works and Minister for Finance, in the 2022 budget statement, allocated 10 million cedis towards a comprehensive feasibility studies of Blekusu and the surrounding communities. Subsequently, my ministry is engaging Ministry of Finance for the release of the funds to enable the Hydrological Service Department and undertake additional feasibility. I wish to indicate to this honorable member for Cape 2 South, Mr. Speaker, and this House, or this House, that my ministry will not relent in our effort to enhance the resilience of our coastal communities to erosion and flooding, and I will update this House as we make further progress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any supplementary? Yes, honorable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to refresh the memory of my colleague, Member of Parliament, who is also the Minister for Works and Housing, that your response to this House and to my question as you have referred to indicated that we will see the commencement of phase 2 at the end of the year 2021. It is the same reason why this question had to come back to this House in 2022. So I'm finding it difficult to reconcile your answer to the question in 2021 and the current answer in this response, which says that you are now commissioning a technical feasibility study focused on Blekusu community to enable Mr. Amandi Holding Limited to continue with the phase 2. Would you kindly make it clearer to me? Because in 2021, you said we'll see the commencement in 2021. And in fact, indeed, you assured us that in June we'll see the short cutting. How can we have you answer that we have a short cutting in June, and then we are now going to have a feasibility study? Please help me understand that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe I addressed her concern in paragraph 5 of the statement that I read, and I want to read again. Mr. Speaker, in my previous response to the same question to this August House, I indicated that the Ministry of Works and Housing noted the urgent need to undertake the second phase of the Blekusu Coastal Protection Project, and therefore commissioned technical feasibility study focused on Blekusu community to enable the measures Amandi Holdings Limited continue with the phase 2 of the project. However, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Public Financial Management, Public Investment Management Regulation LI 2411, a more comprehensive study is now required. Previously, this was not required because we didn't have this LI 2411, but now it's required. And it is, so far as it is required, we are now supposed to conduct additional feasibility studies, which will include environmental feasibility and social feasibility, which was not done in the previous exercise. And that is why I'm saying that as a result of that, we are going to do additional feasibility study, and it requires some resources, which the finance minister allocated 10 million Ghana cedis for that. And we are currently engaging the finance ministry for that funds to be able to embark on the feasibility study. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry that this has to go on the way it's going, because I want to read to you what you said yourself, Honorable Minister. You said, and perhaps you may want to call for the Hansard and also go on City FM Online and Peace FM Online and see exactly what you said in June. You said, with immediate effect, you will continue the phase 2 of the Sea Defense Project for the people of Adina, Agavaji, Salakopa, and Amuchinu. It's difficult for me to reconcile this new effort to do the feasibility study. You are continuing with a project that has already commenced. The project commenced in 2015. Phase 1 is completed. What your assurance to me was in 2021 was that it was going to commence at the end of the year 2021. The reference to the feasibility study was only because the leader of our side, Honorable Haruna Idrisu, had insisted that it find presence in the budget of 2022. That's only when the Minister for Finance came back to add that addition. So for you to now rely on that addition, which really is a feasibility study of the whole coastal stretch, begs the question, please. The two are not the same.
Honorable Member, what is the question?
Mr. Speaker, the question is, why is the Minister for Works and Housing in 2022 revising the answers he gave me in 2021 to this specific question of the continuation of the phase 2 of the Katusi defense?
Honorable Member, you may have to rephrase your question.
Mr. Speaker, in 2021, the Honorable Minister assured us in the House and also in Katu South, in the presence of the community and the chiefs, that we will see Amandi back to site, and he said this in June. Now, based on the request by the leader of our side, for the Minister for Finance to indicate what budgetary consideration had been done for the coastal community. A certain figure, which he has quoted here, was announced, but that has nothing to do with the continuation of phase 2 of the Ketusi defense. So I'm asking the minister, why is he making it the same answer, which shouldn't be? Because they are two separate issues. The feasibility study is for the whole stretch of Ghana. My question is specifically for the phase 2. But the minister conveniently uses that response
Minister,
from...
I'm sure you get the question now. Yes, so may you respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, of course, I spoke about the phase 2 of the Blekuso coastal protection project. And I assure the country that government is committed to the construction of that project. There's no doubt about that. And I can say here that government is committed to the construction of phase 2. But we are going through a process. I've just indicated to you that the LI 2411 was not in place when the previous sea defense projects were implemented. Now we are required to do additional feasibility studies, and it's a process that we have to go through. Regardless of our commitment, we cannot circumvent any legal processes to implement any project. So it's a process that we are going through, and therefore I don't think there's no contradiction in what I said in 2021 and what I'm saying today. Thank you.
Honorable, you still want?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. This is my third one. The second one was an explanation.
Your third one, I doubt that, but I'll allow you.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister assure me when exactly this will happen and when this LI came into being? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the honourable member that government is committed to implementing phase 2 of the Blekuso project. But I am unable to give specific timeline because I'm going through statutory processes, and therefore it depends on it. There are bureaucratic processes and all that you have to go through. So it will not be advisable for me to state a specific date. But we know we are very much committed. The LI, I believe, came into being in 2020, before the previous sea defense projects were implemented. Thank you.
Honourable members, we'll move to the next question, and that is the last for the day. Actually, when you go through our standing orders, question time to minister shall ordinarily not exceed 1 hour. Ordinarily not exceed 1 hour. Except that the Speaker may, in exceptional cases, exercise his discretion and permit questions after the expiration of the time stated, and also for such questions as are described in Order 64, that is urgent questions. I decided to extend the time because for some days now we've not had question time. That's why I extended it, but it's now almost 2 hours. And so we'll take the last question, which stands in the name of the Honourable Member for Okakwe South, Honourable Ms. Dakwa Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the Minister for Works and Housing when the final phase of the storm drain at Kokompe in Okakwe South constituency will be completed.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Works and Housing has taken note of increasing risk of flooding in many parts of Accra, as you may be aware. Accra is
low-lying, and many communities are prone to experiencing flooding. Mr. Speaker, over the years, the Ministry of Works and Housing has implemented major drainage projects in many parts of Accra and indeed other parts of the country to mitigate flooding. Mr. Speaker, under the National Flood Control Program, 3 major drainage projects have been completed in Greater Accra. These are the Domi Market, Phase 2, Ashie and Bleko drainage project. It is worth noting that several other major drainage projects are at various stages of completion in the region. Mr. Speaker, some works were done on the drainage in Kokompe about a decade ago. The completion of the works was prioritized under the ongoing National Flood Control Program. Hence, the Hydrological Services Department was tasked to carry out engineering surveys, designs, and cost estimates. A contract was subsequently awarded for the works, and the contractor is expected to mobilize and take possession of the site within the next few weeks. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, I wish to indicate to the Honourable Member for Okankwe South and this August House that my ministry will continue to work towards enhancing the resilience of vulnerable communities upon obtaining the necessary financial resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any supplementary? Well, there being no supplementary, I want to state that the question time is over, and we will now move on to item 7. Honourable Minister, you are accordingly discharged. Thank you so much for coming and responding to the questions of members. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, now we can go to presentation at the commencement of public business. 7C.
Yes, I just wanted to inform the House that at the pre-sitting meeting, leadership guided the speakership that they will not take statements, and so we will take statements tomorrow. We will move to item 7, public business, presentation of papers, and I've been guided that 7C is ready by the chairman of the committee, Finance. 7C.
Thank you, Speaker. With your leave, I would like to make a correction to 7C.
Yes, leave granted.
Okay. So report on the instead of what we have there, it should be the report of the Finance Committee on the Fees and Charges Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2022, not 2021.
Honourable members, please make the necessary corrections. It's 2022, not 2021. Now you can go ahead to present the report.
Of the Finance Committee on the Fees and Charges Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2022.
Honourable members, the report is accordingly presented to the House and is for distribution to all members of Parliament. Yes, which other item?
Mr. Speaker, now we can take 9, motion, on page 3.
Honourable members, item 9, motion that this Honourable House adopts the investigative report of the Committee on Defence and Interior on the incident of the military brutality on civilians in Wa. Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, if the Vice Chair of the committee will move there.
Yes, I hope in your review of the composition of the committees, you've taken care of the gender card. A number of the ladies will have to chair some of the committees, not vice chairs. Yes. It's just notice to you that if you haven't done it, my committee will do it. Yes.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask that this Honorable House adopts the investigative report of the Committee on Defense and Interior on the incident of the military brutality on civilians in Wa. Mr. Speaker, in the meantime, I would like the Hazard Department to capture the report as having been read in its entirety, whilst I reiterate on 2 points in the recommendation and then the conclusion. It is recommended that the senior...
Honorable Vice Chair, before you go on, let me just be sure that members have copies of the report. Because I tried getting mine, and there was none. I've just been given some very hot copy. See, very hot, which meant that it's printed now. So just give us a few minutes for the report to be distributed to members.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just hold your fire. You just give a few minutes. Honorable Vice Chair, you may now move the motion.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask that this Honorable House adopts the investigative report of the Committee on Defense and Interior on the incident of the military brutality on civilians in Wa. Mr. Speaker, in the meantime, I would like the Hazard Department to capture the report as having been read in its entirety, whilst I reiterate on 2 points of the recommendations and then the conclusion. Mr. Speaker, it was recommended that the senior officers of the ranks of Major and Captain be posted to the 10th Mechanized Battalion to assist the commanding officer in the execution of the tasks assigned him. Again, there is the urgent need for the soldiers who allegedly brutalized and tortured Abdullah Ahmed, the car washing bay owner at Uchao, to be identified, tried and punished by the military high command if found culpable, to serve as a deterrent. The committee also recommends that the state should take urgent steps to promptly and adequately compensate all the victims of the military brutalities in war. It is noted that the aftermath of the attacks the Minister for Defense paid the initial medical bills of the victims who were hospitalized. The gesture of the Defense Minister is commendable, but should not be absorbed as it is the state's responsibility to adequately and promptly compensate the victims. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the committee hereby appeals to the House to adopt the investigative report and the necessary action effected as per the recommendation. Thank you. I so move that the House adopt this report. Thank you.
Yeah. Motion moved is now. Any seconder, yes.
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion ably moved by the Vice Chair of the committee. Mr. Speaker, in doing so, I'd like to urge this Honorable House to take the investigative report on the incident of military brutality committed against the people of Wa very, very seriously. Mr. Speaker, I say so because this is one of the clear opportunities we have as a House to demonstrate that following the advent of the 1992 Constitution, the military is answerable to civil authorities. And how do we ensure that the military is answerable to civil authorities? When atrocities of this nature are committed, Parliament's oversight mandate is a classical case where we are able to demonstrate the people's power over the military, which is raised, maintained, and sustained by the taxpayers' money. Mr. Speaker, having made those preliminary remarks, I would now like to delve into aspects of the report for the consumption of the House. Mr. Speaker, the particular investigation that was carried out by the Committee for Defense and Interior was at the instance of the minority leader who drew the attention of this august House to some military brutalities meted out against the people of Wa. Mr. Speaker, this committee, your Committee for Defense and Interior, actually traveled all the way to Wa and engaged with various stakeholders, including the military, the RECSEC, and the chiefs and people of Wa. Mr. Speaker, it came to light in the course of our investigations that the trigger of the violence that was visited on the innocent people of Wa was the snatching of a phone that was supposedly owned by one soldier attached to the 10th Mechanized Battalion in Wa. Mr. Speaker, the fact shows that the said soldier had gone into town in plain clothes, mufti, and so was not even identified as a soldier. Unfortunately for him, two people on what is popularly known as a Mahama Kambu snatched his mobile phone, and the following day when he returned to barracks, he then informed his colleagues about the incident. Mr. Speaker, out of, I don't know, youthful exuberance, because the officer who was in charge, a Lieutenant JC, who had just been commissioned into the armed forces, then ordered his colleagues to go into town and attempt to retrieve the mobile phone. Mr. Speaker, those are the facts. And so when the troops arrived in town, they took the law into their hands and beat up anybody who, came into sight. Mr. Speaker, this was what actually happened. Now, what comes to the fore, Mr. Speaker, is the crime rates in our country. And so at the time of the incident, it was very clear that mobile phone snatching had become rampant in Wa and its environs. Armed robbery incidents, and we spoke to the police. All these things were rampant within Wa and its environs. And so as a committee, it is part of our responsibility, and we have made the recommendation that government takes the initiative to ensure that, Mr. Speaker, the security situation in Wa and its environs is improved. Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this against the backdrop that a few days ago, a lawyer from that part of the country who was traveling home from Accra, Mr. Speaker, was murdered in cold blood in between Bole and Bamboy. And so what it means is that even after the committee traveled to Wa and made its findings in respect of this matter, the security situation in the country, particularly in the Upper West region, still remains tensed, and something urgent ought to be done to ensure that the security situation in Wa is improved. Mr. Speaker, the brutalities that were meted out to the citizens of Wa was very harrowing. And when this committee, the Committee for Defense and Interior, Mr. Speaker, interrogated some of the victims, Mr. Speaker, it was really very shocking. I refer, Mr. Speaker, to page 6 of the report. And at page 6, Mr. Speaker, one of the victims, a teacher by profession called Regan Salifu. Mr. Speaker, Regan Salifu was standing in front of his shop when the rampaging soldiers approached. In fact, he was holding his baby. The fact that he was even holding a baby did not deter the soldiers. They took the law into their own hands, ordered that the baby be given to a police lady, and once the baby was handed over to the police lady, they beat up the teacher to pulp. Mr. Speaker, this is found at page 6 of the report, and I just want to read from line 3. Mr. Speaker, this was what Regan Salifu had to say. Out of curiosity, he went out of the shop to ascertain what was happening. As soon as he came out of the shop, 3 soldiers approached him and ordered him to lie on the floor. He was holding his 9-month-old baby. So the soldiers asked that he gives the baby to a policewoman who was standing nearby, close to the Zoli Rural Bank. When he tried to resist, he was hit hard with a stick. That was when he gave the baby to the policewoman. He laid on the ground, and the soldiers picked up a Veronica bucket filled with water and poured it on him while he rolled on the floor. Mr. Speaker, the Upper West Regional Coordinating Council, PRO, by name Cletus Awuni, was also beaten to pulp. His only crime was that he attempted to ask the soldiers when he saw them on, he saw them, they were on the rampage and were beating people without any provocation. When he tried to intervene to ask that they refrain from such conduct, he became a victim himself. He was beaten and wounded. He was hospitalized. And Mr. Speaker, all these people I have mentioned had to be hospitalized. But the point needs to be made that we're in a democracy. Gone are the days when soldiers could act with impunity. And so this House must speak with one voice, that they are maintained by our taxes and therefore must treat civilians with utmost respect. The rule of law, Mr. Speaker, must be applied at all times. The recommendations, Mr. Speaker, are very clear. The military high command definitely deserves some commendation. When the incident happened, the military high command dispatched a high-powered delegation to Wa, led by the Chief of Army Staff. And, Mr. Speaker, when they did their own investigations, they came to the conclusion that their men were at fault. And so in order to demonstrate that they were unhappy with what their men did, they summarily tried them, found them culpable, and meted out punishment. Mr. Speaker, the report captures the punishment. So one Staff Sergeant Sapongedu was reduced in rank to corporal. Then we have Corporal To Kwebu Oben. He was a corporal, he was reduced in rank to private. Then the rest of them who were private soldiers and therefore could not have been reduced in rank were detained in custody. Some were detained for 14 days, others were detained for 30 days. So they actually took steps to mete out punishment. But Mr. Speaker, what your committee is saying is that the punishment meted out is not enough. The pain that was inflicted on the victims requires that the state take steps.
Honourable Member, my attention has been drawn to the time.
Very well.
And I will have to direct that we hold the proceedings beyond the normal stipulated time in view of the nature of business before the House. As will direct. Yes, you may go on now.
Mr. Speaker, the point I am making is that the fact that the soldiers involved have been punished is not sufficient. The committee is of the firm belief and view that the victims of the military brutality be compensated by the state. This is important because, Mr. Speaker, the victims suffered various degrees of injuries and must have spent their own money to settle their medical bills. In fact, when we arrived in Wa, it was clear the Minister for Defense did his part. He paid the initial medical bills of the victims. But that wasn't enough. And so the committee members had to make contributions from our own resources to support some of the victims. And so, Mr. Speaker, if your committee took these initiatives to at least assuage the pain that the victims went through, it is important that the state does something, and very promptly, Mr. Speaker. On that note, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to conclude by stating that this investigative report should serve as an eye-opener. The military high command, the Ministry of Defense must take steps to ensure that civil-military relations in our country is improved. That is the only way we can sustain our democratic experiment. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, Honourable Cletus Avoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
thank you for giving me the opportunity to make some few remarks following the presentation of the Committee on Defense and Interior report presented by the Vice Chairperson of the committee. Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of this August committee, and I was part of the delegation that went to work for this investigation. So I wish to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for facilitating our trip to work and for supporting us to be there for 2 or 3 days with the help of the RCC of the Upper West Regional Administration that we did this work. Yes, what are the facts of this matter? It is important that members who are not, honorable members who are not members of this Committee on Defense and Interior should be able to know the basic facts in this matter. Mr. Speaker, there is now established for the first time a 10 mechanized battalion in the Upper West region. There's a military detachment there called 10 mechanized battalion. Why are they established there? They were sent there about a year or 2 ago because of the jihadists and then the extremist threats from the Sahelian countries, particularly Burkina Faso, because the Upper West region shares a border with Burkina Faso. So Ghana government wants to maintain the integrity of this country, the peace of this country, and therefore have moved a battalion to Wa called 10 Mechanized Battalion for the purpose of protecting us. The fact is that on the 1st of July, in fact, a day before the 1st of July, 2 soldiers went to town to have lunch. 2 of these soldiers from the 10 Mechanized Battalion went to town to have lunch. On their way back, they took a Kambu. Those lorries they call John Mama Kandu. They were in the car going back to the barracks. And one of them had a call from his mother. And while he was in the car, he was talking to the mother. Then 2 people came on a motorbike. And when they got to the side of the Kambu, they snatched the phone from this soldier man. They snatched the phone from this soldier man. And when they want to challenge them, the pillow rider pulled a knife and said, if you joke, we'll choke you. So the Kambu driver or rider sped off with the 2 soldiers and they went to the barracks. Then the following day, as we were told, the soldiers mobilized between 50 and 80 of them to go back to Wa Town to search for the 2 people who snatched their phone. They didn't report the case to the police or to anybody. They just told their immediate commander because the commander for that area had traveled to Accra. So there was a young lieutenant who was in charge of them. So they told him, and then 50 to 80 of them marched into Wa Town to look for these 2 people and to retrieve their phone. What happened when they got to Wa Town? They started brutalizing people left and right. You were in your shop, they pulled you out and beat you. You were passing in the vehicle, they pulled you from the car and beat you. Both men and women. And people were made to roll, etc. This is the background. Until people complained here and there, until about an hour or 2 hours later, their commander reached out to them in town and said they should come back to the barracks, and they went back. These are the main facts. And I want to make some few observations from these facts. First and foremost, as I said earlier, this is the first time that we have a detachment of army in Wa, and the purpose is to protect the citizens against terrorists, against jihadists, against extremists, etc. The purpose is not to go and brutalize civilians. I thought that if that incident took place, the first thing for the soldiers to do was to report to the police, who are trained to investigate and identify criminals and then have them. Or to even report to their senior officers, and then they will have a way of reaching out to their counterparts in other services so that they can retrieve the phones, if any. They didn't do that. As my colleagues have said, they decided to go to town and then beat people and take the law into their hands, and that was very, very unfortunate. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note the date for this incident, 1st of July, 2021, that they did this. My worry is
Do the soldiers know the importance and significance of 1st July in the political history of this country? That it is a day that we not just independent, but we had a republican status. We had our sovereignty from the colonial masters. And that is a sovereign day for us. It is a day where the Ghanaian personality is personified. If they were trained or educated to understand this, they won't use 1st July to go to town and attack civilians. They will not do that. That is the most unfortunate part of it. So I think that one aspect of the training of these young officers and recruits should not just be the military training and drill, but civic education, political education, and the civilian-military relationships. That's very important. Mr. Speaker, another observation, very important observation, is that day we asked, there were policemen and women on the streets in Wa. There were policemen there, but they stood aloof. They didn't ask the soldier, what are you doing? We are there to keep law and order. What are people doing? When we asked the police why they did that, they said they want to avoid a headlong collision between the police and the army. That if they make a mistake and intervene to stop them and the rest of them, they will be those that they will attack. And they wanted to avoid this confrontation between soldiers and police. What does this tell us? That we don't have mutual goodwill and relationship between the army and the police. And that is very dangerous for us. That those who are to take care of our lives, protect our country, do not have coexistence. That is very dangerous for us. Mutual suspicion, mutual disrespect between police and army. So what is our fate? What is our fate, Mr. Speaker? I think it is important that with this background, we use our good officers to appeal to the military high command, to appeal to the police high command, so that they see how they can reconcile their differences, if any at all, to see how they can narrow their egos and work as a team for the betterment of this country. This third war between the army and the police would not help us. It's very important. Because if the police had acted and just told them, oh, my brother, what are people doing? It's not good. Let's go back and address it another way. The excesses wouldn't have been committed. But they said that they wouldn't do it because it will lead to a different story. So I think that there must be coexistence between the military and the police. And we must do so as sooner than later. Mr. Speaker, I think that the army has a case to answer. As I said earlier, we know why you send you there. You defeat that purpose. How can beating people retrieve a phone, one phone, and 100, 200 people suffer for that? Extreme excesses. And that is very, very unfortunate in this modern era. So I want us to take this report very seriously and then try to see how we can bring the two institutions together. Try to see how we can educate the security personnel in the country. Of late, or for some time now, police excesses, police brutality on civilians is a daily occurrence. Military excesses, brutalities is now coming into the fore. The respect, we all know how much the Ghana Army and Police have had one international accolade for this country. We know they have done peacekeeping outside the country and have won a lot of respect for this country. They are very professional, particularly the army. Why this in your own country? You go outside, you behave well, you come back to your own country and your behavior is different. They are taking the respect that we have given them, the army, for granted. The respect that we have normally given them for granted. And I think it is high time we tell them that nobody is above the law. We have a role to play as civilians. They have a role to play as security men. And therefore, we should all come together to be able to develop this country. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to observe that, like the ranking member, Honorable Agarga, said, the army acted timeously, the High Command acted timeously, the Minister of Defense himself was there, and then they tried to broker the peace. We must also thank the overlord of Wana, what's the name? Pelpo,
the second. He received us very well, and then he was able to control his people so that there was no retaliation. If we had some other place, by the time, the youth would have taken to the streets, and that would have been very unfortunate. But the chief was able to contain the situation, and there was no escalation of violence in Wa. And I think we should commend the paramount chief for Wa traditional area for that. And then, as I said, the army, the Minister of Defense and Army, we should also commend them. But I want to state that, finally, I want to observe that in the future, Mr. Speaker, with the greater respect to leadership of this House, this report has become more or less stale. I have, for the past 3, 4, 5 months, been following leadership. Let's take the report. If we had taken this report at the time that the matters were still fresh in people's minds, we would have known how to address it. Now, many members are saying they don't know what to say. It is we those who went for this operation or this exercise who are conversant with the facts in our talk. But you delay a report for about 6 months or more. When we have gone and come back, what is the point in spending so much money, time and energy, flying to war and coming back, only for a report to be gathering dust here? And not only that, there are other reports that are outstanding. I think that we should resolve that when a report is tabled, is brought back, we should take it timelessly so that we can have the effects of that report. On that note, I thank the House, I thank Mr. Speaker for this opportunity, and pray that the good work the Army has been doing, they will continue to do that, not do anything that will lead to disrespect or that will make Ghanaians have a second thought about them. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, honourable member.
Right, honourable Speaker, I'm glad that this side will have a bite at the cherry. Honourable Speaker, yesterday I was very elated when, at your behest, constitutionalism and the rule of law were placed on the front burner. Yesterday was a very, very interesting day for this House because we projected the rule of law. It is in this context that I will say a few words concerning what has happened, which is the incident of the military-civil brutality in Wa. Honourable Speaker, what is a very sore point for me was the basis of the brutalities. When I just looked at it, I was saddened. And with your kind permission, I want to just touch on that. A referral was made to the Committee on Defense and Interior by the first Deputy Speaker, Honourable Joseph Osei-Wusu, to undertake an investigation into the military-civil unrest every soldier was seen in a viral video beating up people in Wa in the Upper West region over a missing phone. Honourable Speaker, I was scandalized to know that the basis of soldiers brutalizing civilians was just on some inconsequential loss of a phone. I thought the nation had traveled some distance of decency, more than what is being reported. Honourable Speaker, soldiers are trained for external security purposes. And we should underline that. We do not invest in soldiers so they come and beat the civilians up. In fact, they ward off external attacks. So in the event of some wayward people trying to disturb the sovereignty and the security of these nations, then you bring in the deployment of soldiers. So they face the external aggression. But when you have soldiers, sitting their row upside down, and then with all the training they've had, they begin to beat up civilians. It leaves much to be desired. And I think this report should go down as one of the important things that we want to correct the situation. I thought when it comes to the internal affairs of a nation, the individuals who have been trained to handle such crises all the time are the police. When you have crowd control, understanding how to fire into the air and also use rubber bullets and the rest of tear gas arrangement. So I do not understand why, for whatever reason, the soldiers will ignore the internal arrangement of the police and then decide to beat up the civilians. Honorable Speaker, somebody described, I think it was Lenin, who described a parliament as a talking shop. For once, this august house should never be seen as a talking shop. We should follow through with the disciplinary measures that will be meted out to these wayward police. This august house should never rest until we see punishment visited upon these wayward soldiers. And that will give us that a good reason that in this country, when people go wayward, for whatever reason, they are disciplined. So the promotion of lawlessness sometimes finds space in the fact that the people who are lawless, they go scot-free. So, Honorable Speaker, this important report of your committee is not for entertainment value. It is supposed to be followed through until we see that those who are wayward were punished. In fact, it is in that people of like mind will refrain from ever attacking civilians. Honorable Speaker, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words, but I want to see people punished so that impunity will stop in this country and the rule of law will be upheld. And I'm grateful for what you did yesterday, because yesterday was an opportunity for Ghanaians to see that without constitutionalism and the rule of law and a clear understanding of the departments of government, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, we do not have any future as a people. I'm grateful to you for that opportunity.
The Honorable MP for Wa Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to make some statements or to make an observation on the reports presented to us on the brutalities that occurred in my constituency, Wa Central, after some military men, for reasons that are unacceptable, had to move into town and brutalize the people. The Speaker, to start with, let me thank the committee for this extensive work done. About 20 witnesses had been contacted and about 11 stakeholders were also contacted in all the attempts to present this report. And so I'm very grateful for the extensive nature that has gone into the report, and also thank Mr. Speaker for accepting to make reference, accepting to direct that this matter be investigated and a report brought here. Mr. Speaker, it tells us that we have moved away from the situation where the military can take the law into their own hands and can brutalize individuals in a country where democracy becomes the pronounced system of administration. Mr. Speaker, the military, as we all know, protects the Constitution of Ghana, protects the sovereignty of Ghana. It's not an interior functional institution, and that every single time the military moves away from their core function into the life of civilians, they are sidestepping their core duty to the state. And what has happened is a direct reflection of the failure of the military. Mr. Speaker, since the day the military moved into this chamber, when it was unacceptable for them to have done so, they have done a number of other things for which we should be worried. And this report should send a signal to the military that more and more they are overstepping their bounds. And that today we have moved away, like the penultimate speaker has just said. For 30 years or so, we have moved away from the military taking over the reins of power and brutalizing individuals for reasons that can be resolved through civilian established rules and regulations and legal systems. Mr. Speaker, the effect of the military intervention or the military brutality in town, in the war town, was felt throughout the country. The pain was reflected in the minds and thinking of many Ghanaians that individuals who did nothing wrong were stopped by the wayside, beaten up, made to crawl on the bare ground, thrown into gutters, kicked and beaten. This was something that hit the conscience of Ghanaians. When I heard it, I called the regional minister to find out, and thankfully it was captured in the report. And he said he didn't know anything about it, and I was very much alarmed. And called the commander-in-chief, and he also said he didn't know about it. Mr. Speaker, it tells about the impunity that was, that pervaded the military establishment in town. In the report said that one JC, who was the commanding officer and who authorized the brutalities, according to page 13 of the report, the gentleman was inexperienced and newly recruited into the military, and for which reason he may have acted with his inexperience. Mr. Speaker, the fact is that the military training, as we have it here, is supposed to build a person from a civilian everyday life into a military life that is disciplined, and that is not what happened before the training, in your life. That is not it's a definition of a whole life change in the person. So it can't be an excuse that because of the inexperience of the man or the officer, or because he is newly recruited, he could have done what he did. And I'm happy the ranking member has said that it is not enough and they are asking for more punishment, with the 74 of them who had been given various terms of punishment, as in suspension from the military for a number of days, and gotten them back. Mr. Speaker, thank God, in the investigation, we had some of the victims, or all the victims, coming out to speak their minds fearlessly and committed in telling the truth. There was no fear of people intimidated by the fact that they were talking about the military to keep quiet. And I'm particularly very impressed with a gentleman, the first witness, who was so confident that he told the story of how he was stopped because he was taking a picture of what was happening, how he was brutalized, kicked, beaten until he was oozing with blood, and asked to bring his phone and asked to delete the record of everything he has taken, or he had taken. The Speaker, he insisted he wasn't going to take them off the phone, and that with all the beating, he said he had suffered enough beating to delete what he took would have been it was unacceptable to him, so he refused to delete it. And today we saw them, later on, we saw them throughout the country, the effect of what happened. Mr. Speaker, that person here is a hero in the enterprise. He insisted that he wasn't going to delete it. He brought it to the knowledge of the people, and today we can go out and talk about exactly what happened to the people of Wa. And I commend him for being that steadfast and that committed to doing exactly what he had to do, to bring it to the notice of the Ghanaian people, and for us to reprimand the military action against these innocent people. So I commend them all, the many people who suffered and who told their story, who brought it to us. I think that each of them is a hero in his own right. And so I would also follow up with the recommendations by the committee that these people who had been brutalized and who suffered all this pain, must be compensated for what has happened to them. We need to do something so impressive in the minds of people that in the end no military man can do what they did. It has to be a pain to them for what they have done, so that they can reflect on it, and it will be a guide to them that they can't continue to take the laws of the land into their hands and misbehave the way they did. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the opportunity given me to contribute to this, and I thank the committee as well for bringing out these things to aid. But I also agree with Honorable Avoka that we had been waiting for this report for a very long time, and I had been questioned many times over by my constituent exactly when is this report coming out. Thankfully today it's out, and it's important that in future we are more explicit in presenting such a report to the House. Thank you.
Honourable members, we still have 2 more motions for today, and this is a very important motion we are debating. I may have to suspend the House for some 15 minutes and then come back and we'll continue, because I have a few words to also add to what is happening. So I just suspend the House, go and do something and just come now. 15 minutes only. House, the setting of the House is accordingly suspended.
He has done well, though.
I don't know why he decided to say for August.
For
2 and 3 hours.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable members, debate to resume on motion number 9. So those members who want to contribute, yes, Honorable Ladi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on the report that has been made on the issue of military brutalities in the Upper West region, specifically Wa. Mr. Speaker, we appreciate the fact that the military has been put there in order to help protect the country and, for that matter, its people. We do appreciate that fact. At least, if for nothing at all, we know that their activities are very important. Under no circumstance will any of us underrate what they are supposed to be doing. This notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, it's quite interesting when you look at the report carefully. In the first place, you simply ask yourself a question. How do you go on rampage, running around, beating anybody at all, and demanding for a phone that you have said was snatched from you by people or persons who were on a mama can do? When you ask yourself this question severally, and you are not careful, you may veer into saying things or feeling otherwise about certain individuals. Mr. Speaker, just as one of those who commented earlier had stated, the fact is that at least, even if you were a civilian taken today into military training, you are being trained to leave maybe one or two things. That is the characteristics that you have as a civilian and into the army. So there is no point in saying that they are new or they are old. Mr. Speaker, it simply is not acceptable and it's not fair. It is not acceptable and it's not fair. Mr. Speaker, looking at the video that was basically in all aspects of social media at that time, you would wonder whether these are people that some of us had actually wanted to join in those days because of their discipline, because of the fact that they are people who really understand and would always be cautious in doing anything that would mar their reputation. But what did we see? My pain, Mr. Speaker, goes with the fact that a man holding his child of about 9 months, you dare tell that person to hand over the child to a policewoman who was at a bank, maybe on bank duty, in order that you beat him. Can we look at the future, the repercussions of what will happen in the future to that child and the man? There is no way that child, that little child, although 9 months, will not be told that this was what happened to your father when you were 9 months. That child will be told. And what is the perception of that child, how will the child feel? How will he take it? How will he ever look at the military? We always see them as a no-no group or category of people. And it's unfortunate. Mr. Speaker, the officer who is supposed to be supporting them, that man, that person from the coordinating council, simply telling you that, why are you doing this? You shouldn't continue. Then you go in and beat him up mercilessly. As at that time, I learned that an individual got a fractured leg. If that is true, Mr. Speaker, that man will be deformed forever. There's no way you have a fracture and ever think that you can have your energy or your balance whatsoever as natural as it used to be. What message does this send? Mr. Speaker, it is simply an issue that needs to be dealt with and dealt with seriously to the core. I appreciate the fact that, like the ranking member said, and I read in the report, that certain measures have been taken. But the measures, excuse me, are not satisfactory enough. Just as I've elaborated, the one with the fractured leg, after the 30 days or the 3 months or the 2 weeks that someone was put in detention, will he ever have his leg back correct or in perfection, as that person will come out and continue to work? Let us look at that. Those whose ranks have been reduced, they are going to continue to be there and to work. After all, they went and did all the things that were the things that are not acceptable. Mr. Speaker, there is a commanding officer who told them to actually go and ensure that they retrieve the phone. Whom were they going to retrieve the phone from? Mr. Speaker, who were they going to retrieve the phone from? And how does an officer word its source, excuse my language, word its source, tell officers to go and retrieve a phone that had been snatched? I mean, if you just think of the whole thing, you don't even know what to say. And sometimes people would come out to want to say, you temper justice with mercy, which is not fair, and it doesn't help us. Mr. Speaker, how do we blame the police here for not intervening? When I overheard that, I was very sad, because I have heard, I have seen, and I have listened. When it comes to the police and the military, the police are seen to like they are nobodies. No, they are nothing. And they took a good decision by not intervening, because if they did, they would have been disgraced. They would have had issues. And that would have been very bad. Fact is, Mr. Speaker, the law had been taken into the hands of these military men, and they need to be dealt with accordingly, because nobody is above the law. They should be dealt with accordingly. And I want to agree with my colleagues that stringent measures should be taken against these officers, and also there should be some kind of discussions to unite the military and the police, such that when the military has issues, they should know that the police are always there to ensure peace and to protect lives and properties. That is why they are put within the communities. They have been given specific trainings to handle as civilians, notwithstanding the fact that in one way or the other, maybe at one time or at one place or another, something wrong could have gone. There's no human institution that is perfect. They should know and agree and understand that when even they have issues, they should report to the police. And the police would be able to handle it. Mr. Speaker, in order that I don't take so much time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this great opportunity to add my voice. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the whole story, you come to realize one thing: education. In fact, if you look at the recommendations, the last paragraph, the recommendation I see here is that steps be taken by the Military High Command and the Ministry of Defense to foster good civil-military relations in communities where new military units have been established and in the country as a whole. Mr. Speaker, I believe that this recommendation actually falls short of what will prevent a reoccurrence of this incident in the future. Mr. Speaker, I believe that it should be part of the military training. In fact, if you look at the current intake into the military programs, they are basically SHS students. These are people who are literate. These are people who have been educated and can be trained in making sure that we can have a balance between civilian and military relationship. If it's a matter of just posting people to new communities, what happens if they are transferred? What happens if they have not been trained properly to appreciate their role as the protectors of the state? Mr. Speaker, if you take the initial incident that happened with military personnel in Mufti that had gone to town and had been robbed, under normal circumstances, this issue should have just been reported to the police to deal with it, investigate, and take on the culprits. Unfortunately, it is becoming more like a macho issue, where some people feel that because they've been trained very hard, maybe in Shire Hills or some other place, they feel that they can use their machoism to brutalize the ordinary person. I do believe that the only way out of this, to stop its reoccurrence, is to ensure we train them and inculcate in them that the military is not there to brutalize and bully civilians, but rather they are there to protect the ordinary persons. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time this has happened. Recently, in my own constituency, some military men came for a wedding. In the evening, they went to town and saw somebody making a call in his car. They picked the person and they brutalized the person, simply because they think that they've gotten some new powers because they've been trained as new military personnel. And they didn't come from my constituency. They had come all the way from Accra to accompany their friend to have a wedding. So I believe that the reoccurrence of this happening all over the country clearly indicates that there's a gap in the training we are giving to our young men and women in the military at their various training stations. And I believe that that should be one of the recommendations that we need to send to the Military High Command, so that their training structure, the content of the program they run for these young men and women, are done in such a way that they respect the civilian. After all, everybody will go on retirement in their various area of professionalism. In fact, if what they are doing continues, it means that if you brutalize a teacher, the next day the teacher should go to town and be caning everybody in town. I believe that it is high time we change that culture through training and make sure that our young men and women who go through the military become very civil in a lot of these dealings with the public. With these few words, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
It seems the mood is to continue with the matter, since a number of you are still on your feet. Leadership, what do you say? Do we take more or we move on?
Mr. Speaker, obviously we cannot control endlessly, but I can see my colleague from West having come from that area, especially with the Wichao incident. I think it would be fair for him to be heard. Then maybe we'll come to leadership, if you will not mind.
Leadership will want to have a bite. Is that the case?
Speaker, because we've planned to have a meeting with you, which Speaker, you have rightly directed that you give importance, you will be there. And
do we plan to have a meeting today?
Yes. Speaker.
I thought tomorrow.
After adjournment.
Today is what? 1st June. The meeting we planned is tomorrow, 2nd June. Tomorrow, 2nd June, that leadership will be having a meeting with me, not today. But I am myself scheduled to receive the family of the late Indeburi, officially coming to inform us, and I've communicated that to leaders to come and assist me. So let's take that into consideration. We have some few minutes for the other motions or motion, and then we'll continue tomorrow.
Speaker, yes. With respect, I think I'm in agreement. We will push the meeting to Thursday, as you please, the shadow meeting to Thursday. And now maybe we can conclude on with the I think we've had enough. That's my view. I think we've had enough, Speaker. We've had enough. So maybe we should conclude on that and then take one of the private members' motion that our colleagues are so eager to.
Well, we are wasting too much time on this. I'll give opportunity to the honourable member for Wa West. Yes, he should take the concerns on board and make sure that the contribution is brief. Then we are come to leadership. Any of you who wants to make a contribution will do so. Then I make my comments and directives. Yes, honourable member for Wa West.
Right, Honourable Speaker, I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I know it's been a very tight decision for you to make, and I want to thank leadership for also giving me the opportunity to make a contribution to this very important investigative report of the Committee on Defence and Interior on the incident of the military brutalities in Wa. Mr. Speaker, on the very day in question, on the 1st of July, when we saw the videos doing the rounds on social media, a lot of us didn't believe that was Ghana. Some of us thought that probably was in Mali or probably Burkina Faso, only to realize that it is not just Ghana, it's right in the house where I come from, Wa Central. Mr. Speaker, if you look at what happened in Wa, that is exactly what happens when you find soldiers who are attempting to enforce the law. Soldiers are trained to protect the sovereignty of the state. Soldiers are trained to defend the sovereignty of the state. Soldiers are not trained for law enforcement. On the very day in question, when a soldier man lost his phone, went back to barracks and informed his colleagues, a Lieutenant Jesse, inspired them onto the streets. But the Lieutenant Colonel, who is a commanding officer, had by then traveled to Accra for a course. Mr. Speaker, from a Lieutenant Colonel to a Lieutenant, the gap is so huge that immediately we detected the challenge of command and control. In the absence of Lieutenant Colonel, the most appropriate person to be acting as officer in charge should be at least a major, not a lieutenant. And these were two lieutenants who are mates, and one felt a bit superior, but he was not the one who was actually in charge. When the young men went to town, Mr. Speaker, these are fresh recruits. These are fresh recruits who are just graduated. And when they graduated and they were sent to war, they were still being bonded and being trained to be deployed. They had never been deployed before. And they went to town and did what was unthinkable. Mr. Speaker, Lieutenant Kwesi Jesse, the commanding officer, a professional soldier by all standards, returned from Accra and did what soldiers know doing best. All the officers who had gone to town were put on 14 days detention. The duty sergeant, a staff sergeant, was reduced in rank